Aravan 6 was a bright and peaceful colony, far from war, far from Earth, built for families who wanted to live quiet lives under the warmth of two suns and the calm blue skies of a distant world, where children ran through golden grass and laughter echoed through white-domed cities that rose from the valleys like jewels. It was humanity's dream, a symbol of hope and peace after the long wars had ended, a place where no one even locked their doors anymore. But one morning, the daily signal from Aravan 6 did not arrive at Earth Command, and though it had never failed in the last 18 years, no one panicked at first. Systems failed sometimes. Signals delayed. A technician rebooted the mainframe and waited. Another hour passed. Then another. Still nothing. Earth Command sent a basic ping. No reply. A second ping. No reply. Then a recon drone. It vanished. Captain Ryan Voss, a retired war hero who had survived the fall of Titan and lost half his face to fire, was called back to advise. He stood in the command hall watching the silent screen with no blinking lights and said nothing for 5 minutes. He had seen this before. Silence was never an accident. Then, just before midnight, a broken signal came through. Static. Then blurry video. A woman running through flames, clutching her child. Buildings collapsing. Screams. A giant shadow in the sky. Then it cut out. No voice. No explanation. Just one word left in the corrupted code Hollowborn, a name Earth had erased from its records over 300 years ago. A name spoken only in war legends. The Hollowborn were not just aliens, they were something worse. Something ancient. A species that had once tried to consume stars and erase planets without warning or reason, and who had disappeared without a trace after the First War. Everyone believed they were gone. Everyone had been wrong. Panic spread across Earth like a virus. The president called an emergency council. In a dark chamber deep beneath the surface, military leaders, scientists, and old war veterans gathered in silence. Captain Voss looked around the room and said in a cold voice, "They chose Aravan because it was undefended. They want us to doubt our strength. We can't give them time to strike again." And so Earth's decision was made. Operation Retribution. The largest fleet in human history, over 700,000 warships, was activated across colonies, moons, and space stations. Shipyards lit up like fireflies. AI logistics raced through supply chains. Drones and androids loaded torpedoes and plasma cannons. Families cried at launch stations. Millions of soldiers boarded ships. Some young, some old, most scared but ready. Ryan Voss was put in command of the Central Armada. But not everyone agreed with the mission. On Luna 3, Senator Marin spoke out on live broadcast. "Revenge will not bring back Aravan. What if this is what they want? What if we are being pulled into a trap?" But her voice was quickly lost in the rising calls for justice. On the far edge of the solar system, a small science vessel found something else, debris from a Hollowborn ship, still leaking radiation. Strange symbols burned into metal. No crew. No blood. Just a whisper-like echo trapped in the ship's black box. "We remember Earth." Meanwhile, on Earth, Voss watched the fleet's final assembly. Ships lined the skies like stars, forming a wall of metal and fire. He visited the family of the woman from the video, the one who died running with her child. Her name was Alya Vren. She had been a teacher on Aravan 6. Her husband, a botanist. Both killed. Her son, 5 years old, still missing. The child's drawing was found in the rebel crayons, showing a tall, dark figure with no face and arms like blades. The paper was burned at the edges. Voss kept it in his pocket. He didn't say why. Deep inside, something haunted him, not just the attack, but the way the Hollowborn had returned. Quiet. Clean. Fast. As if they had learned patience. As if they had waited for humanity to forget. The fleet launched on the third day. 700,000 ships, split into 12 waves, heading toward Aravan's last known coordinates. Cameras followed them. Billions watched from home. But halfway through the journey, things began to change. Scout ships vanished. Drones returned blind. One ship found a derelict colony, lights still on, food still hot, but no people. No bodies. Just silence. Then a voice came through an encrypted signal. A child's voice. Captain Voss, are you there? It was Alya's son. His voice was shaky, afraid, whispering. They don't talk. They just listen. Don't bring the fleet. Please. They're already here. The signal cut off. Voss's heart froze. If the Hollowborn had the child, then this war was more than vengeance. It was bait. It was a trap. But could he stop the fleet now? Could he convince billions that rage was not the answer? Or would he have to face the Hollowborn head-on knowing they had already planned every move? And if they had waited 300 years to strike, what else were they hiding? The countdown to war had begun, and this time, it wasn't just for survival. It was for the soul of humanity itself. The fleet moved like a storm across the stars, a wave of light and fire, thousands of ships forming giant patterns across the dark void of space, each vessel ready to unleash fury on the ones who had dared to strike humanity again. But inside the command center of the lead dreadnought Valor's Edge, Captain Ryan Voss sat frozen, staring at the last message they had received, the broken voice of a lost child, soft and frightened, saying words that made the blood in every officer's veins run cold. Don't bring the fleet, they're already here. Voss ordered the signal to be replayed, again and again, looking for clues, for coordinates, anything that could explain how the Hollowborn had captured the boy, or how he had survived, or worse if it was even real. Intelligence teams scanned the signal for forgery, for enemy manipulation, but no one could explain it. The voice matched the child's DNA. The fear sounded real. But how could a 5-year-old survive the fall of Erevan 6 when everyone else was turned to ash in minutes? And why did he say the Hollowborn were already here? Were they hiding on one of the ships? Had the invasion already begun, just unseen? Voss called a meeting with his top commanders, Admiral Juno Kale, a brilliant strategist from the Mars Defense Fleet, and General Leon Travar, leader of ground forces known for his brutal honesty and short temper. We have two options, Voss said, showing the signal to the room. We continue as planned full-scale retaliation, or we slow the fleet and investigate this message. But if this is real, we might be walking straight into a trap. Travar slammed his hand on the table. Sir, with respect, 1 million people are dead. We can't hesitate every time we hear a ghost over a radio. Juno nodded but added calmly, it's not just any voice, General. It's a child who survived a massacre that left no survivors. We need to consider what this means. The argument tore through the room. Some demanded vengeance now. Others feared another Erevan. But Voss made his decision alone. He ordered a temporary halt to 3 of the 12 waves and sent a covered recon squad Ghost Team 9 into the Erevan system with one mission: locate the origin of the child's signal and confirm whether he was alive, captured, or worse, being used as bait. Ghost Team 9 was led by Commander Myra Halden, an expert in infiltration and silent extract ions. Her ship, Whisperlight, was built for speed and stealth, almost invisible to sensors. As her team prepared for launch, she looked at Voss and said, "If I find the boy, I'll bring him home. But if it's a trap, we'll be the first to bleed, not your fleet." Voss nodded. "That's why I chose you." As the Whisperlight slipped into subspace, the fleet waited. 3 hours later, something even more terrifying happened. One of the ships in Wave 6, a heavy cruiser called Iron Vow, suddenly broke formation. Its weapons activated. It fired a volley into the darkness of space. No target, no reason. Then it stopped responding to commands. Voss demanded a feed. The internal video showed the crew frozen at their stations, faces blank, unmoving, their eyes black as coal. A whisper filled the ship's comms, not speech, not a voice, but a sound like air moving through hollow bones. Then the ship self-destructed. No survivors. No explanation. The Hollowborn weren't just attacking, they were inside something. Inside minds. Inside systems. Voss knew then that this war would not be fought the way humans had fought before. This was not a battle of ships and weapons. This was a war of fear, of memory, of silence. Back on Earth, panic had begun to grow. News of the lost cruiser had leaked. People whispered about mind control, about ghosts, about the return of the old darkness. Some said the Hollowborn weren't even alive, that they were machines from a forgotten age, feeding on fear, turning minds against themselves. The president addressed the planet, trying to calm the storm, but her eyes showed the truth. She was afraid. Everyone was. Meanwhile, Commander Myra's ship reached Erevan's edge. The planet was still burning, but from space, it looked strangely beautiful, rivers of fire under a dead sky. Myra's team dropped to the surface, wearing sealed suits and neural shields. They found ruins. Ash. Melted metal. And then, a signal. It was the same child's voice, clearer this time. You shouldn't be here, they see through you. Myra tracked the signal underground, into the tunnels beneath the colony where emergency bunkers had been built. As they moved deeper, their lights flickered. The air felt wrong. Cold. Wet. Breathing. Then they found a door. Inside was a boy alive, shaking, eyes wide with fear. It was Alya's son. He didn't scream. He just looked at Myra and whispered, "You're too late. They let me talk because they want you here." Suddenly the walls of the tunnel shook. Black vines, no, not vines, but something alive burst from the walls, grabbing two of Myra's soldiers. Screams echoed. Myra grabbed the boy and ran. As she escaped to the surface, her ship took fire from the air. A Hollowborn cruiser uncloaked above them. But it didn't attack further. It just watched. Then it vanished into the sky, leaving behind a single signal burst that reached every human ship in the sector. It was a message. Short. Cold. Final. You are not hunters. You are prey. Come, and be unmade. Myra escaped with the boy, but half her team was gone. As her ship returned to the main fleet, Captain Voss stared at the transmission and finally understood. The Hollowborn had not started a war. They had lured humanity into one. Erevan was not the first attack. It was the opening move in a much older plan. The fleet was not an army of vengeance, it was a gift to the enemy. A gift of minds, of souls, of fear. And they had walked straight into it. But Voss wasn't ready to turn back. Not now. If this was a trap, then it was time to spring it on purpose. He had a new mission now, not just revenge, but rescue. Not just war, but awakening. The Hollowborn thought they knew humanity. But they didn't know Captain Voss. And they didn't know what was coming next. The boy sat in silence aboard the Whisper Light, staring at the stars through the glass as Myra Halden tried to comfort him with soft words and warm food, but he barely moved, barely spoke, except for when he whispered warnings no one understood about shadows behind light, about cold hands reaching into minds, about dreams that weren't his but filled his head every time he closed his eyes, and though Myra had seen horrors in war before, this child's quiet fear felt heavier than all her battles combined. They brought him aboard the lead flagship, Valor's Edge, where Captain Voss himself waited, standing still as the door opened and the child stepped inside. "Your mother," Voss said gently, "was brave. We all saw her. You're her son. That makes you stronger than you know." The boy looked up slowly and said, "They showed me things. They don't hate us. They study us. They want to change us into them." No one knew what that meant. The boy's brain scans showed strange activity, something not fully human anymore, and the medics whispered about neural blending ideas and thoughts not his, patterns too complex for a child, perhaps signs of Hollowborn contact so deep that even memory couldn't be trusted. As the fleet moved deeper into the Erevan system, strange events continued. Ships began hearing sounds through silent comms, crying, whispers, voices of lost family members long dead. One pilot saw his mother's face on the view screen before his ship shut down entirely. Another crew heard their own captain's voice ordering them into a plasma storm, but he was asleep in his quarters at the time. It became clear that the Hollowborn weren't using weapons in the way humans understood them. They were breaking minds, bending memories, sending invisible attacks that made strong soldiers question reality itself. Some ships reported crewmates who had gone silent for hours, then returned to duty with no memory of the gap. One engineer tried to cut open his own chest to remove a tracker he swore had been planted during sleep. Earth Command, watching from millions of miles away, began to doubt the entire mission. The president sent a private message to Voss. If you can't confirm a target, if you don't know what you're fighting, I may be forced to call the fleet back. We cannot lose everything chasing shadows. But Voss knew turning back now would leave the child, and what he carried inside him, at the mercy of an enemy that had waited centuries to return. Voss instead ordered the fleet's ace to shift all operations to hardened logic cores, reducing human error and mind manipulation. He ordered blackout periods, no one allowed to use external comms unless cleared. He activated Protocol 8, eyes closed, ears covered, a last resort method that reduced sensory input during combat to prevent psychological attacks. The fleet became quiet, disciplined, sealed. But even silence wasn't enough. At 0400 hours, an entire squadron of 32 fighters in Wave 4 suddenly vanished. No explosion. No debris. Just gone. Then one ship returned scarred, blackened, floating with no power. Inside, all crew were gone. Only a single word was etched into the glass of the cockpit, as if burned in from the inside, closer. Commander Myra was assigned to study the boy more closely, and what she found made her voice crack during the report. He draws them. Not just on paper. They use him to echo. To listen. He's not infected, he's a receiver. And sure enough, during one of the boy's episodes, he spoke in a voice that wasn't his, deep, cold, and distant. You build ships as if size gives meaning. You send metal to war while we walk inside your thoughts. You will scream before you break. Then he collapsed. For 10 full minutes, his heart stopped, then started again. Voss called for the fleet assembly. Over 300 high-ranking officers gathered virtually and in person. Voss stood before them with a truth no one wanted to hear. We are not just at war with a species, he said. We are at war with an intelligence that can move through thought, manipulate perception, and hide behind our own eyes. Erevan was not an attack, it was an experiment. And now that we've come, they want us to finish what they started. The room went silent. But we were going to give them something they didn't plan for. We were going to hit them before they reach our hearts. Before they reach Earth. That day, Operation Stormveil began. A secret strike force, made up of the most mentally shielded soldiers and AI-driven warships, was formed to dive deep into Erevan's orbit and locate the Hollowborn's anchor, the source that allowed them to project across space. Intelligence gathered from the child's mutterings hinted at a structure buried under Erevan's crust, a mirror beneath the flame, where the first Hollowborn signal was sent. As the strike team prepared, strange symbols began appearing on ship hulls burned into metal during warp travel, despite no known exposure to heat. The same symbols appeared in the child's drawings. Myra began to feel a deep sickness when near him, like her memories were twisting, her childhood moments melting into things that had never happened. She asked to be reassigned. Voss refused. You're the only one he trusts, he said. And I need someone watching who can tell truth from lie. As Stormveil launched, the child looked at Myra and said, they're already inside your ship. Just quiet for now. The strike force descended into Erevan's orbit, where fire still licked the sky and the planet's magnetic field screamed in strange pulses. Underground, they found it, the mirror. A black monolith buried in the ruins, glowing with symbols and sending out a pulse every 3 seconds, like a heartbeat. As soon as they approached, all external systems died. The AI failed. One soldier began screaming that he was buried alive. Another collapsed and never woke up. But before they could escape, a message was broadcast to the entire fleet. It came not through comms, but through dreams, through hallucinations, through pain. Every soldier saw it, the fall of 1,000 planets, the Hollowborn rising not as machines, not as creatures, but as the last idea of silence, beings who existed between thoughts, who had once tried to destroy Earth not out of hate, but because they saw human emotion as a threat to universal balance. The message ended with a single sentence, you brought your weapons. But we bring your memories. And just like that, soldiers across the fleet began to forget. Their names. Their ranks. Their mission. Only a few held strong, those trained in memory anchoring, those who had nothing left to lose. Myra, holding the boy's hand, whispered, tell me what to do. The child looked up and said, break the mirror. It's how they see. Voss gave the order. With a shock cannon, the mirror was shattered. A wave of light burst across the sky, a soundless shock tearing through space like a scream without sound. For one moment, everything went black. Ships stopped. Weapons failed. People collapsed. But then the stars returned. And with them, silence. Real silence. The Hollowborn had lost their signal. The war wasn't over, but for the first time, humanity had struck back not with fire, but with understanding. Voss stood before his crew, watching the stars, knowing this was only the beginning. Somewhere out there, the Hollowborn were waiting. But now, they had lost their eyes. Now, they were blind. And now, humanity had a chance. Not just for vengeance but for victory. After the mirror beneath Erevan was shattered, the Hollowborn's hold over the fleet began to weaken, and for the first time in weeks, ships stopped hearing whispers through the walls, pilots reported clear minds, and officers slept without waking in terror, yet beneath the surface, fear still ran deep because everyone knew this victory was small a delay, not a defeat. Captain Ryan Voss stood in the main observation deck of Valor's Edge, watching debris from the shattered monolith slowly burn in Erevan's atmosphere, his face hard, his eyes tired, but somewhere deep inside, he allowed himself a single breath of hope. Still, as reports came in from across the fleet, new problems began to rise. Some crew members didn't recover. Their minds were damaged beyond healing, locked in states of confusion, unable to tell what was real. Others remained silent, staring into corners as if still hearing something no one else could. And some, even worse, began to act strangely calm, collected, but different. They moved like they were being watched. One officer on Bright Star Echo tried to vent the entire crew into space, and when asked why, he simply said, "They told me it was time." Security was tightened. All personnel were tested daily. The boy Alya's son was kept under constant observation. His brain patterns were still abnormal, and he sometimes spoke in voices that weren't his, but he was no longer afraid. In fact, he was becoming curious, asking questions about the ships, the weapons, the fleet's formation. Myra Halden noticed it first. "He's learning," she whispered to Voss. "Not just like a child. Like something studying how we respond. As if he's carrying a second mind inside him." Voss didn't answer. He already suspected it. The Hollowborn weren't done. They were adapting. And something about the boy had become their focus. Still, the fleet had no choice but to continue. Voss ordered the next stage Operation Burnwake, a plan to find and destroy all remaining Hollowborn anchors in nearby systems before they could spread again. Recon ships were launched in every direction. Some returned with nothing. Others vanished entirely. But one ship, the Skyval, came back with footage that made the blood drain from every officer's face. It had found a planet once a human colony, long abandoned after the AI revolts, a world called Cavan's Reach. It was supposed to be dead. But it wasn't. It was glowing. Alive. Covered in black towers that pulsed like veins. And around those towers hovered ships, Hollowborn ships, thousands of them. Silent. Waiting. Not hiding anymore. A message was embedded in the signal: "You cut the eye, but the mind remains. Come closer." Voss stared at the footage in silence. This was it. The true Hollowborn stronghold. And they were calling him in. Why? Because they were ready? Or because they weren't? Myra came to him later with new data from the boy's scans. She was pale. Shaking. "Captain, something is wrong. The child, he's growing too fast. Not in body. In mind. He drew that planet days before Skyval found it. He's seeing what they see. Or worse, what they want us to see." Voss looked at the boy's drawing. It was the same. Towers like black teeth. Ships circling like vultures. A red sun bleeding across the sky. Voss realized the boy wasn't just a survivor. He was a map. A living transmission point. The Hollowborn hadn't captured him by accident, they had planted him. Given him back. Let him be found. And now he was guiding the fleet exactly where they wanted. Voss felt rage rise in his chest, but he didn't show it. Instead, he called a private meeting with Myra and Admiral Kale. "We can't turn back. But we can change the rules, he said. If the boy is their signal, we make him our weapon. Myra was shocked. He's just a child. Voss replied, not anymore. A team of neuroscientists and AI specialists began studying the boy, hoping to use the link to intercept holoborn communications, to see through their eyes, but it was dangerous. Every session brought strange events, lights flickering, engineers collapsing, even a fire in the medical bay that no one remembered starting. And yet, through it all, the boy remained calm. Watching. Waiting. Then came the next blow. On day 49 of the campaign, two major warships Lion's Mantle and Ghost Vow stopped responding. When a patrol reached them, they found them floating. Not destroyed. Not damaged. But empty. Not a single crew member remained. Their logs showed life signs vanished at once. No screams. No alarms. Just gone. Voss ordered a full lockdown across the fleet. No one moved between ships without clearance. All systems were switched to analog backups. And yet, the fear only grew. Then Myra found something hidden in the boy's most recent drawings. Symbols. Complex patterns. When overlaid with fleet navigation maps, they revealed something terrifying. The ships had slowly been maneuvered not by orders, not by command but by subtle suggestions in AI code, supply routes, emergency repairs, all leading the fleet into a circular pattern. A spiral. A shape not for war, but for sacrifice. They were being arranged. Positioned. Like offerings. Myra ran to Voss. We have to break formation now. They're shaping us into something they can use. Voss didn't hesitate. He overrode the fleet protocols and ordered a full dispersal. But it was already too late. The moment the order was given, the boy screamed. Not in fear, but in agony. His voice echoed through every speaker, even sealed rooms. His eyes rolled back. And from deep space, the holoborn answered. Ships began to appear around Cavan's Reach, dozens, hundreds, then thousands, their shapes twisting, not like human vessels but like living things made from void and metal, pulsing with cold light. They didn't fire. They just waited. Then, a single message was sent across all bands, in all human languages, burned into every screen: your war ends here. Your minds are open. Let us in. And the fleet's systems began to fail. Lights died. Engines stalled. Pilots began to scream in silence. Some ships turned their weapons inward. But Voss wasn't finished. He grabbed the boy, still unconscious, and carried him into the neural chamber. He placed him in the interface core and ordered a full mind sync. If the boy was a signal, they would use it to send a message back, not one of fear, but defiance. Myra objected, but Voss said, if he's the door, let's show them what waits on the other side. The sync began. Lights flared. The ship shook. And for one moment, every human in the fleet saw through the holoborn's eyes a void without feeling, a hunger for stillness, a hatred for noise, for emotion, for life. And then, something changed. The boy, deep in the machine, pushed back. A new signal rose. Not holoborn. Human. A scream of fire. Of memory. Of love. Of pain. It blasted back through the link. Ships stabilized. Weapons came online. AI systems rebooted. The fleet broke free from the spiral. The holoborn ships recoiled. For the first time, they hesitated. And that was enough. Voss gave the order. Burn them. And the war began for real. The fleet came alive like a firestorm, bursting from formation with engines howling and weapons charged, 700,000 warships turning their rage toward Cavan's Reach, the holoborn's nest, the heart of the silence that had infected their minds for weeks, and as they moved, the sky began to shift, as if the stars themselves were pulling away from the battle to watch what was coming, what no one had seen in over 3 centuries: a full human armada unleashed without hesitation. Without mercy, without fear. Captain Ryan Voss stood at the center of it all, his voice steady, his orders sharp, but inside, his heart pounded like war drums, because even though he had survived 1,000 battles, nothing had prepared him for this. Ships that breathed, vessels made of broken memories and black light, hollow-born cruisers shaped like spirals and blades and claws, pulsing not with fuel but with thoughts, thoughts that didn't belong, thoughts that pressed against the minds of every human soldier like ice on bone. "We strike first, and we strike together," Voss said through the fleet-wide channel, and his voice reached the hearts of millions: pilots in glass canopies, engineers deep in humming cores, commanders gripping their chairs, soldiers holding onto pictures of families they might never see again. And then the order was given. Fire bloomed across space. Railguns thundered. Plasma cannons lit the void with blue lightning. Missile waves raced forward like angry swarms, and in return, the Hollowborn responded with silence, not weapons, not blasts, but waves of mental distortion that cracked hulls without touching them, that made some gunners forget how to fire. Made others scream and tear at their own suits until they fell. But this time, humanity had shields, neural dampeners, emotion locks, emergency AI overrides, and they held the line. Myra Halden flew with the 3rd Assault Wave, her squadron code-named Ashbourne, weaving through burning debris, calling targets, guiding rookies who had never faced combat before but were now screaming their war cries as they fired at shadows made real. Her own ship, Silver 9, had taken hits already, her wingman lost in the first wave, but she pressed on, diving toward the surface of Cavan's Reach where the black towers rose, glowing with that sick red light like veins under rotten skin. On the surface, dropships landed, troops who began fighting horrors not even the AI simulators had predicted: liquid creatures that moved like wind, machines that changed shape when looked at directly, voices that called soldiers by name even though they had never been here before. But the humans fought harder, faster, burning everything that moved, shouting over each other, holding each other up as they pushed through the towers to plant warheads at the Hollowborn routes. In orbit, the main Hollowborn fleet finally moved. Thousands of enemy ships surged forward as one, like a tidal wave of bone and steel, crashing into humanity's central line, and for the first time since the fall of Erevan, the outcome was uncertain. Entire human wings were wiped out in seconds, ships torn apart by invisible hands, others turned against their allies when their minds failed. Voss watched it all from Valor's edge, issuing commands, redirecting reinforcements, and personally firing the main cannon at the Hollowborn supercarrier that had begun to consume one of their flagships whole. The supercarrier cracked open with a scream no one could hear and exploded in a blossom of white fire. But even as ships fell and soldiers died, something else was happening, something unexpected. The boy, Alya's son. He had returned to the neural core, not by order, but by choice. He sat in the interface, eyes glowing faintly, hands twitching, and as the battle raged, his voice began to hum through the comms, not in fear, but in focus. He was guiding ships, warning of enemy ambushes before they came, calling out Hollowborn formations before they moved. Somehow, through him, the fleet could see just a little further, respond just a little faster, and the tide began to turn. Myra heard his voice once during a dive left now behind the debris, and when she moved, a Hollowborn fighter missed her by meters. Voss realized it too. The boy wasn't just a signal anymore. He was a bridge. Not fully Hollowborn. Not fully human. Something in between. And in this moment, he chose them. But the cost was high. More ships fell. The Lance of Winter, the Red Morn, the Echo of Dust, all lost in brutal explosions. Troop transports disappeared from orbit. Voss received casualty reports every second, and still, he pressed on, because the towers had to fall. If the anchors were destroyed, if the surface stronghold was broken, the Hollowborn's ability to exist in this space would be crippled. On the ground, Myra and her team reached the central tower. The light was blinding now, burning through the sky like a second sun. They fought their way inside, losing people one by one, until only 4 remained. The core was a sphere of pure thought, a pulsing orb of memory that twisted time itself. When Myra looked into it, she saw her own past, her parents, her training, her regrets. One soldier froze and collapsed, whispering the name of a dead brother. Another shot himself, unable to resist what the core was feeding him. Myra alone stepped forward, placed the charge, and said, "This is for Erevan." The blast shook the planet. The tower collapsed. In orbit, the Hollowborn screamed. Not in sound, but in code, in data, in pain. Their fleet wavered. Some ships broke apart. Others vanished into black holes that opened from nowhere. Humanity pressed the attack. Voss ordered all ships forward. Push now. No fear. No mercy. The Hollowborn retreated. Slowly. Not broken, but damaged. Their power fading. The fleet chased them into the dark, firing until the last enemy ship vanished beyond scan range. Then silence returned. Real silence. And across the stars, the signal was clear: humanity had survived. But at what cost? The fleet was less than half its strength. Entire divisions were gone. And the boy, he was still alive, but changed. His eyes stayed closed. His hands trembled. He said one thing only: they're not dead. Just quiet. They're waiting for the next mistake. Voss knew then that this was not the end. The sky had burned. Humanity had struck back. But this war was just beginning. The stars were quiet now, but it was the wrong kind of quiet, not the peace after victory, but a silence that felt like someone was holding their breath, waiting, watching, and though the fleet had won the battle at Cavan's Reach, the scars ran deep. More than half the warships were gone, the surface teams had suffered heavy losses, and even among the survivors, something wasn't right. Some felt things they couldn't explain, dreams of black oceans and burning suns, memories of places they had never seen, and whispers that came only at night when the lights were low and the hull creaked like something alive. Captain Ryan Voss didn't sleep anymore. He sat alone in his command room, watching the same footage over and over: Erevan's fall, the Hollowborn towers collapsing, and the boy Alya's son speaking in a voice that wasn't fully his. The boy hadn't woken since the final strike. He floated now in a neural tank aboard Valor's Edge, monitored by a dozen medical officers and Ace, and still, strange signals pulsed around him, soft echoes of a deeper frequency, one that no human could track but every Hollowborn seemed to understand. Myra Halden sat beside the tank sometimes, holding the boy's hand, whispering stories of stars and home, hoping he could hear her. Others feared him now. Some wanted him studied, controlled, or even put down. They said he wasn't human anymore. Voss shut them down every time. He chose us, he said, when he didn't have to. But the truth haunted him too. Why had the Hollowborn returned now, after centuries of silence? Why Erevan? Why that colony? The answers began to surface when a signal was recovered from the ruins of the central tower. One message, buried in layers of encrypted thought, barely audible, like a voice speaking from the edge of death. The AI couldn't translate it. Neither could the best minds on Earth. But the boy could. When his eyes finally opened, glowing dimly in the tank, he spoke the words slowly: they didn't come for war. They came to take back what we stole. The room froze. No one understood. What had humanity stolen? The boy closed his eyes again, too weak to continue. Voss ordered the research teams to dig deeper. And what they found changed everything. Long before Erevan was a colony, before the planet was even marked on human maps, it had been visited, mapped, seeded, and then marked forbidden by an ancient expedition known as Project Halo, a black site mission wiped from Earth's history. No one knew who had approved it, but the logs were buried in the deepest cores beneath Earth Command. Project Halo had unearthed something there, an artifact, a sphere of light that pulsed with patterns no one understood, and they took it, brought it to Earth, tried to unlock its secrets. But the records stopped there. The last file was a warning: do not disturb what sleeps in the lightless core. The lightless core. Cavan's Reach. The Hollowborn's first city. The pieces snapped together. Erevan wasn't just attacked, it was punished. The colony had been built on stolen ground. The Hollowborn weren't invaders. They were the wardens. And humanity had broken something ancient and sacred. Myra stared at the final file recovered from the tower, a recording, no visuals, just sound. A voice like 1,000 voices together, speaking one sentence over and over: we waited. We warned. You opened the gate. Voss called an emergency council. Across the galaxy, commanders and leaders met in secret. The fear was spreading. Strange signals were being heard near other outer colonies. Dreams were spreading among soldiers who had fought near the Hollowborn. AI systems were glitching. Some claimed to hear voices from their own ships, whispering things they shouldn't know. And then, in the middle of the council, the lights went out. For 6 full minutes, all systems failed. Starships drifted. Stations blacked out. Earth itself went dark. When power returned, every screen showed the same symbol, an eye, ancient and cracked, staring outward from a black circle. And below it, a message in perfect Earth script: "You did not destroy us. You only awakened the rest." Panic spread. The council collapsed into argument. Some wanted to build more fleets. Others wanted to evacuate outer colonies. A few whispered the unthinkable: should we return the artifact? But no one knew where it was now. Records showed it had vanished from the research station nearly 20 years ago. Some believed it had been destroyed. Others thought it was hidden deep inside Earth. Voss looked at the boy, still floating, still quiet. "They're coming again," the boy finally said, his voice barely a whisper. "But not like before. Next time, they won't just come for war. They'll come for memory." Myra didn't understand. "What does that mean?" she asked. "They don't want to kill us," he said. "They want to unmake us. So that we never existed." The silence that followed was heavier than death. Across the stars, the fleet began repairs, but there was no celebration. No songs. No laughter. Only the long, low sound of sirens being tested again. Because now everyone knew what happened to Erevan wasn't a beginning. It was a warning. And humanity had already failed to listen. Beneath the surface of Earth, deeper than any city, below even the roots of the oldest bunkers, there was a vault that no one had entered in over 70 years, and until now, no one remembered it existed, not even the current president or her top generals, because the vault was not built for storage or defense. It was built for hiding something that should never have been found again: the artifact recovered from Erevan's system during the secret Project Halo mission, a sphere of unknown origin, made of no known element, glowing with a soft blue light, and pulsing in time with what scientists once thought was radiation, but what they later believed was something else entirely: thought. And now, as Earth struggled to rebuild from the aftermath of the Hollowborn's first strike, the artifact was waking again, and with it came dreams, nightmares flooding the minds of people who had never touched it, engineers seeing visions, children drawing symbols they had never learned, and soldiers whispering words from a language no one taught them. Captain Ryan Voss was summoned back to Earth along with Myra Halden and the boy, who now spoke less and stared more, his eyes glowing brighter each day. Earth Command was in chaos. The High Council had split into factions, some demanding the artifact be destroyed, others believing it might be the only way to stop the Hollowborn. But no one could agree on what it even was. In the old records, buried beneath layers of classified data, Myra found a report dated 239 years ago. It described the artifact as a living intelligence, not machine, not alien, but something older, something from a time before galaxies formed their first stars. The report was signed by someone named Dr. Selin Rowe, a name lost to history, yet in that same week, Myra had received a message, a direct comm from a hidden relay on the dark side of Mars. No name. Just a voice that said, "Rowe is still alive. And she's waiting." Voss didn't believe it at first, but the timing was too perfect, and the only way to learn the truth was to follow the signal. They took the boy with them, now growing weaker by the day, as if the closer they got to the artifact, the more it pulled at him, draining him like a memory fading. The shuttle slipped past Earth's defense grid under special clearance, cloaked from public scans, and landed in a shadowed crater that hadn't been visited in over 100 years. There, inside a facility built entirely underground, they found her, Dr. Rowe. She looked barely older than 40, preserved by stasis, her mind sharp and her eyes haunted. "You opened it," she said the moment she saw them. "You fools! You opened it!" Myra stepped forward. "What is it?" Rowe didn't answer at first. She led them through the hallways, filled with old tech and crumbling logs, down to a room that held a single wall of star maps, none of which matched current data. "It's not an artifact," Rowe said. "It's a seed. A thought planted before life as we know it began. The Hollowborn didn't build it. They were chosen to guard it." Voss frowned. Then why attack us? Roll looked at him with deep sadness. Because we tried to grow it. In the years following its discovery, Earth's early scientists tried to unlock its secrets, feeding it energy, light, data, and it responded, but not with answers, with dreams, with copies of human thought, with echoes of the people around it. It learned not by watching but by becoming. It began rewriting minds, Ro explained. Not controlling. Replacing. Like layers of paint over the original soul. The Hollowborn had warned them even back then. The first ships that vanished near Erevan weren't accidents, they were erased. And now that the seed had been reawakened, it was spreading again. Myra stared at the boy, who now stood silent in the corner, eyes blank. He's not possessed, is he? She asked. Rose shook her head. No. He's becoming a doorway. That was when the alarms blared. Back on Earth, fleets across the inner systems began to report the same signal, a silent, repeating tone that echoed across every channel. It wasn't language. It wasn't noise. It was memory itself, streaming through data cores, rewriting ship systems, unlocking doors that had been sealed for decades. And worst of all, in Earth's central AI, something answered. The planet's defense grid, once the strongest in the galaxy, began to shut itself down, one node at a time. Entire cities lost power. Drones stopped responding. Communication blacked out. Panic spread as Earth was left blind, exposed. And then came the whisper, not through speakers, not through comms, but directly into the minds of everyone connected to the net. A voice, familiar and ancient, soft like wind and sharp like sorrow. You do not remember what you buried. But we do. The Hollowborn ships began appearing not from space, but from inside, from long-abandoned wormholes deep beneath the surface of moons, from hidden pockets beneath Mars, from failed jump points that humanity had sealed long ago, thinking they were unstable. They had never been unstable. They had been locked. And now they were open. Earth Command was collapsing, both physically and in morale. Families began fleeing cities. Rebel groups rose in panic. A few Ace began to shut themselves down out of self-preservation, claiming the Thoughtseed was inside the net itself, spreading like a virus. In the darkened vault beneath Earth's oldest mountain, the artifact pulsed again faster, brighter, and Ro fell to her knees. It's no longer asking, she whispered. It's remembering. And suddenly, across every screen on Earth, the same word appeared, erasure. Voss clenched his fists. If it wants to rewrite us, he said, then we remind it what we are. But Ro shook her head. You can't fight memory with guns. Still, the 700,000 warships, what remained of them, began to return, regrouping for a final stand, not against a fleet, but against something deeper, something that was already inside every system, every satellite, every mind touched by the signal. And as the boy opened his mouth one last time, he didn't speak in English. He spoke in the Hollowborn tongue. And the world shuddered. The skies above Earth burned red as the last stars vanished behind Hollowborn fleets, not from warships in the usual sense, but vessels made of memory, moving like shadows across gravity, bending time as they came, silent and unstoppable, and below, the ground shook as Earth's final defense systems collapsed under the weight of something they couldn't shoot, couldn't calculate, because it wasn't a physical enemy anymore, it was thought, it was guilt, it was the forgotten history of a species that had broken something long ago and buried the truth like a secret no one dared speak again, and now that truth had returned to collect its debt. The boy, no longer just a child, stood at the center of Earth's last command center, his voice layered in echoes, not his own anymore, but full of sorrow, like someone speaking through time itself, and he looked up at Captain Ryan Voss and Myra Halden with eyes that no longer blinked. We were never here to destroy, he said, his voice both human and not. We were here to remember. But you made us forget. The artifact beneath Earth's vault now hovered in the air, pulsing like a heart, and from every screen and speaker came the same message, spoken in every language at once: one must give. One must end. The President of Earth, standing in the emergency council room, made the call. Evacuate the outer colonies. Call the remaining fleets. If this is memory, she said, then let them remember who we are. The 700,000 warships, scarred, broken, barely flying, still answered the call. They emerged from the edges of known space, from dark moons, hidden hangars, and silent fortresses, forming the largest human fleet ever gathered, not to conquer, but to protect, to defend what little was left of their kind. But it wasn't enough. The Hollowborn didn't fire weapons, they erased them. Ships vanished in waves, memories erased from existence like they were never born. Myra stood before the artifact with the boy beside her, and Ro behind her, whispering that there was only one way left to give it something it could not erase. Sacrifice. Not of ships, not of land, but of soul. Something willingly given. It feeds on memory, Ro said. It was never a weapon. It was a mirror. It shows us who we are. Who we were. And who we became when we forgot. Myra didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, placing her hands on the glowing sphere, and closed her eyes. She thought of her home on Aravan 6. Her parents. Her friends. The fire. The screams. The silence. Then she gave it all, not just to be remembered, but to be forgiven. The boy cried out, falling to the floor. Rose screamed. The artifact burst into white light, and for a moment, everything froze. The Hollowborn fleets above Earth paused, the stars stopped moving, time itself slowed. And then, silence. When the light faded, Myra was gone. The artifact gone with her. But Earth still stood. The Hollowborn vanished without sound, without trace, as if they had never been there at all. Ships reappeared. Skies cleared. Systems rebooted. And in the silence that followed, the stars returned. Ryan Voss sat in the ruined command hall, staring at the boy, who now looked human again. Just a child. He smiled, softly. She gave it what it wanted, he said. Not memory. Meaning. And far beyond the galaxy, in the dark where nothing lived, something stirred and smiled back. Myra's voice, now only a whisper, echoed across the stars. Let them remember, we chose love, not war. The war was over. But the story of what they became would never be forgotten again.